I mean, look at this thing. Not only does it look and even feel expensive, it smells expensive.
We've all heard the horror stories about how unreliable these things are. Well,
I don't like what this thing is doing to me. According to many of you, this is one of the least reliable, most poorly built SUVs money can buy. But then if you listen to the fans, this is one of the greatest vehicles to ever grace our planet. Who's right? Who's wrong? What actually does go wrong with them? How are they aging? What do they like to live with and drive? Should you ever actually buy one? I'll tell you what, before we answer all of those questions and so many more, there is some critical stuff that you do need to know. First of all, in this video, we're just going to be focusing on the 4th generation 2012 to 2022 L405 Range Rover. But even this can be split into its own sub-generations. As far as engines go, here in Australia, honestly, there are far too many. But in terms of petrols, you'll have 4 to choose from. And as far as the diesels go, you'll be looking at 3. Although, as you can see, all can vary on what power they put out, even if it's the same engine. Now, prior to 2019, these engine choices determined the name of the Range Rover. For example, SD-V8 refers to supercharged diesel V8. However, that obviously made far too much sense, and Range Rover ditched that plan. And instead they changed to the names being made up of the fuel type and then the power output. For example, D350 means diesel 350 horsepower. However, that's really annoying for us civilized countries that dropped the use of horsepower as a unit of measurement about 50 years ago and swapped it to kilowatts instead. Now, as far as trim levels go, there are generally 3 to choose from, although there's a whole bunch of special editions as well. Although, what each of these actually come with can vary from year to year, not to mention the huge array of different options and feature packs as well. Plus, on top of all of that, some combinations of all this are then available in short and long wheelbase body styles as well. And this all explains why the pricing can vary enormously. Here in Australia, the very cheapest examples are swapping hands for a little bit under $50,000. The most expensive ones, around about $220,000. But speaking of enormous, let's talk depreciation. If you bought one of these things brand new, you might want to skip ahead a little bit because this is going to be painful. See, here in Australia, let's take a 2018 SV Autobiography Dynamic. That was retailing for around about $345,000 when brand new. That same vehicle these days is going to be asking around about $175,000. That's $170,000 in value lost in just 6 years. That's about $30,000 a year, not including all of the ongoing running costs. I mean, how can anyone justify that? Actually, on the subject of avoiding stupid financial decisions, don't go getting ripped off when it comes to your car finance. Hit the driver link down there to get yourself the very best finance package. This includes if you've already got car finance, because you could save yourself a fortune. Plus, if you do all of that via that link, we're going to give you $150 worth of free fuel. Now, when it comes to justifying the depreciation, this is where the justification begins. I mean, look at this thing. This is a 2014 model, so pre-update and 10 years old, and for me, it still looks pretty current. In fact, I think this looks so good and so utterly convincing for what this genre of car is trying to achieve. This might be the reason that the Bentley Bentayga and Rolls-Royce Cullinan are so bloody ugly. It's almost like Bentley and Rolls-Royce went, oh, okay, so Range Rover nailed the cool, sophisticated thing. How about we just try to appeal to them super rich that have no taste? Also, hot tip, if you're trying to identify pre to post facelift, look at the headlights. Pre-update, they're this. Post-facelift, this. But no matter if it's a pre or a post-facelift, and no matter what the trim spec is, you're gonna get the sort of stuff you'd expect on the exterior for a vehicle of this level. Plus, there are all of the optional extras like the vent blades being in body color or metallic or black. The wheels can range from 19 to 22 inch, not to mention side steps that can deploy when the doors open. Although that means they're powered by electricity, and that can bring with it a few concerns. Anyway, inside, welcome to more ways to justify the insane depreciation, because this interior is just, it's exquisite. Not only does it look and even feel expensive, it smells expensive. The leather just smells, or the entire interior smells so premium. If there was ever a car interior that embodied one of those exclusive English private members clubs, it's this. Now, the overall design for me is about as close to perfection as it gets. It's this beautiful balance between purposeful yet still luxurious. Now, the Range Rover anoraks out there will notice a few discrepancies with this particular interior. This is a pre-update vehicle. However, it has the post-update digital instrument cluster, post-update HVAC control unit, and an aftermarket infotainment system. And I, for one, think all of that just updates the entire interior. It feels current. Now look, the overall design doesn't change a whole lot between pre and post facelift, but they both have their pros and cons. The post-2019 models run this style of screen HVAC control, which looks fantastic when it's brand new and clean, but this thing is a magnet for fingerprints. And also as far as tactility goes, personally, I just rather the buttons in the old system. I feel like if you're driving around, especially even slightly off-road, it's hard to kind of aim at the buttons on there. You do get used to it, but give me buttons any day. Also, the post update replaces these buttons with, again, sort of screen glass-like style buttons. For me, they just don't work right. I think with buttons on the steering wheel, you need tactile buttons. However, the larger infotainment screen on the post update models is a massive improvement over the previous generation ones, hence why many owners have replaced it with an aftermarket system. Actually, just on the whole infotainment screen thing and phone connectivity, if you want Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as a standard fitment, you're going to look at models post 2019. However, there are owners out there of post-2017 infotainment system screens that have been able to run Apple CarPlay and Android Auto through that screen, although some owners have tried it and have had complete nightmares. Prior to this, you are still going to get Bluetooth, but according to many owners, the old infotainment systems, they're really feeling their age by now. Do what this owner has done, fit an aftermarket system. Now, elsewhere inside, you're still going to get everything that you'd expect from a luxury vehicle of this level, but some of the optional features and extras are incredible. We're talking climate control and massage functions for the front and rear seats, full surround view cameras, rear seats with retractable leg rests, a 1700 watt Meridian signature reference sound system, plus a seemingly endless array of different leathers and interior treatments. Actually, you know what? If you do need the ultimate used Range Rover buyer's guide, go to ReDriven.com and check out the free cheat sheet. It explains everything. But as far as using this interior, let's start with practicality. So much. First of all, you've got little cubby hole glove box up here, a large glove box underneath that. You've got 2.5 cup holders here. Yes, there's a spot for small pretentious coffees like I like today. Let's just go espresso. Also, on some models, I'm not sure if this actual car does it, but I've seen where the cup holders can slide forward to reveal even more storage underneath, but not working on this. Under here, we've got a spot perfectly sized for your phone, actually 2 phones there. And in this car, you've got the refrigerated fridge, which is awesome. That's huge as well. There's heaps of space under there. Massive door bins, little secret compartment in the doors here. More little spot for, I don't know, life's filth and secrets down there. Nothing under here, nothing under the seats. Nowhere for sunglasses, which is interesting. And I think that's it for practicality up front. Now, the ergonomics are incredible. There's so much adjustability to these seats, but they are so comfortable. Fun fact, on the post-2019 models, the seats, they don't look as impressive as these. They look a bit baggy, but according to many owners, they are phenomenally comfortable. It's kind of like the Range Rover version of a beanbag. Looks a bit ugly, but incredibly comfy. And even wear and tear in this car, okay, there are signs of wear, but it's not that bad. So, okay, what I mean, on the steering wheel, this has lost all of its texture here, but because the leather is such high quality, it feels so nice to actually touch. All the wood grain on the steering wheel, excellent condition. Some of the wood grain on the high traffic areas has scratched up a little bit. I think that's to be expected. But even the leather here, the armrests, the seats, the leather has lost its texture, but it's not a bad thing because it is such high quality leather, although it is getting a bit scratched up around the door handles. But in saying that, this car has over 220,000 kilometers on it. This interior is in phenomenal condition for 220,000 Ks. Super impressed. One small thing about ergonomics, which this aftermarket screen has actually fixed, touching the screen is quite good here. When the screen is, I suppose, embedded into the dash, it can be a bit hard. You've got to sort of stretch to get to it. Very first world problem, but. Now in the back seat, I'm exactly 3 centimeters shorter than a celebrity Range Rover owner, Prince William. This is in my driving position. Wow. First of all, the seat comfort is incredible. Plus you can adjust how comfortable they are. They also recline electronically. But as far as space goes, knee room, good amount of foot room. Even if you're in the middle, there's good foot room there, but there's no transmission tunnel. Because you sit so high up, it feels more spacious than it is, and the glass house is phenomenal. It's just a beautiful place to be. Now, as far as wear and tear back here, obviously every Range Rover is going to have different levels of wear and tear, but as I said, over 220,000 kilometers, this back seat does get used all of the time, And like the front, the wear and tear is superb. Leather still super soft and supple. There's a few little minor scratches here and there, but even the high traffic areas where it should get scratched up, they're not. Even all the, I suppose we'll call it the jewelry, everything looks in good condition and feels good, and it smells delicious back here. And then practicality and features in the back seat, here we go. Retractable map pockets here, your own climate controls with air vents in the back, plus RCA inputs, a USB port, a spot, kind of, not really for your phone honestly, 2 power outlets there, your own air vents up here and lighting, good sized door bins, and you don't need to take your leg off to actually access it when you're sitting here, another little cubby hole here, and then in the center console, 2.5 cup holders again, and this will work, I promise, hang on. It worked before, there we go. And another little storage hole here with your Land Rover remote for the screens in the back. Brilliant, brilliant for practicality and features and stuff. Also, you can completely piss off the passenger because you can control the seat. Why isn't it working? It was working before, now it's not working. If the car was on, you can control the passenger seat from this button here. Now, as far as practicality in the boot goes, I do love that this is the classic Range Rover split tailgate. The only issue is this one, that's supposed to go automatically, but it's not at the moment. These things happen. But then once you're in the back, the room and space is massive. But then if this isn't enough space for you, put the seats down via the button. This takes a while, hang on a sec. Cal, just fast forward this bit. But then you end up with a very luxurious van. Okay, let's talk about the negatives of the driving experience first. I don't like what this thing is doing to me. See, I, like you, try to be a humble and empathetic person, but driving a Range Rover, it can quickly turn you into an asshole. Also, you're acutely aware that in a city like Sydney, this is a very big vehicle. I'm feeling this constant anxiety about trying to make it fit down these streets and in traffic. But besides that, there are no other negatives to the driving experience. Range Rover benchmarked the Rolls-Royce Ghost for the driving experience, and in this, yeah, you can tell. I've been lucky enough to drive a bunch of Rolls-Royces, and this shares that same totally luxurious, completely isolating experience. But then with the raised ride height, this immense glass house and this petrol V8, I feel like this actually has more character than the Rolls. I don't remember enjoying driving any of the Rolls-Royces as much as I'm enjoying driving this. And also, because of its well-documented, incredible off-roading abilities, you also drive around with this, it's like a confidence that no matter what scenario is presented to you, you're going to be able to tackle it easily. Look, I'm not a Range Rover kind of guy. I get to drive so many cars that brand appeal is completely lost to me. And honestly, large luxury SUVs excite me about as much as watching paint dry. But this is one of the most exceptional driving experiences I've ever had. But what if something really bad were to happen when you're driving? I mean, something far worse than an engine blowing up. What if you were to have an accident? What safety features are going to be working hard to keep you alive? Well, to take you through what you can expect, it's my old acting and DJ mate, Idris Elba.
Okay, you'll get everything you expect, like 6 airbags, anti-lock brakes, traction and electronic stability control. But its terrain response 2 technology also means the wheels, traction and braking will be optimized to suit whatever surface it's on. Then more recent and higher models can include more cameras than I see on set. The full suite of autonomous crash avoidance technology, alerts and warnings for everything from blind spots to driver fatigue. Honestly, mate, I knew this thing would be loaded with safety kit, but it's a bank vault on wheels.
Okay, the section of the video that we've all been waiting for, unless you own one of these things. What goes wrong with them? Let's start with the exterior and electronics. Basically, if it has electricity running to it somewhere, there will be an owner that has had a problem with it. As I mentioned before, this car has a problem with the powered tailgate dropping down. That's a really common problem. Also in the tailgate, or the upper section of the tailgate, apparently this can have a tantrum if any of the interior panels here are out of alignment. Next up, the door locking mechanisms. These can play up. Sometimes they don't lock, sometimes they do lock, sometimes they just completely lose their mind. There are quite a few reports of panel fit issues, especially with the bonnet, the rear doors and the tailgate. However, with the bonnet fitment issue, this can be a problem because it can report a fault code that the bonnet's basically not closed correctly, but also the sensor that detects that, it can also be faulty. The problem here is, if it does detect that it's open, the only way the car's going to move, if it's on the back of a flatbed tow truck, the car just won't operate if the bonnet's open. Then you've got all the other sporadic electronic complaints like lighting issues, soft closing door issues, power windows and mirrors playing up, sunroof issues which can range from leaking to the whole thing not operating correctly. The problem here is if it leaks, it can leak into the interior and that can cause all sorts of electronic issues. Also on the subject of water playing havoc, don't go paying too much for OEM or aftermarket wiper blades that do a crap job at wiping. Get the Wiper Tech link now there to get 15% off and free express shipping on some of the best wiper blades we've ever used. And then we've got the issues with some of the optional equipment fitted, like the owner that had a problem with his electrically deployable tow bar not coming out, so he therefore couldn't tow his caravan home. Maybe that's the universe telling him that caravanning sucks. Then you've got annoying issues like the Range Rover lettering on the tailgate and the bonnet. It can kind of tarnish and corrode. Now, according to the owners groups, models from 2015 onwards are far less susceptible to these problems. In saying that, but we did read a few horror stories on more recent models. No matter what, but these are pretty terrifying things for a vehicle that's most likely out of warranty. Actually, just on the owners groups, a massive thank you to everybody that helped us research this video. We couldn't have made it without you. Thank you so much. Now, inside the electronic issues continue. Let's start with the HVAC system. Just make sure it actually works. There are plenty of reports that the functions and buttons can fail, that the heating and the cooling can sort of cool for a while, then stop, and even the airflow can be really inconsistent. Now, fixing some of these HVAC issues can be as simple as just replacing the cabin filter. That's a really cheap and easy fix to do. Other times it can be a more insidious electronic issue and the entire dashboard has to come out to get to the problem. That is going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Just make sure, if you're in the market, make sure everything, every button, every function on every temperature and every fan speed actually works. Next up, plenty of owners have complained that some of the screens can flicker. Now, the issue with this, it might be the master infotainment control unit on the fritz. Some owners have been quoted as much as $7,000 to fix that. That is insane. Just make sure the screens work. Then there are the more sporadic electronic complaints, like the actual gear selector not rising out of the center console, so you can't select gears. That's a pain in the neck. But then you've got, I'm going to say, the fun electronic gremlins. Like this car, I've noticed when I'm driving it, it just starts massaging me. I haven't selected the massage function in the control panel at all. It just starts doing it spontaneously. But if this was a partner and they just spontaneously started to massage you, you wouldn't complain, would you? So stop complaining. Also, the key fob, apparently on early models, the key fob itself can wear prematurely, like the chrome section starts falling off or the buttons start failing. Also, whole separate issue, plenty of owners that we spoke to and read through forums and owners groups mentioned that there is no way they're getting anywhere near the claimed fuel consumption figures. Now look, I know I raved about the sumptuous leather interior, but according to many owners, this beautiful leather can lose its, I suppose, its firmness, how tightly it's wrapped around whatever it's wrapped around, and can start looking a bit loose, almost like an old bloodhound. Apparently the actual door handles, they can have issues with the mechanism behind it. The issue here is because of how complex the door is with everything going on, getting in there to fix it can be a complete nightmare. Okay, here's an odd one. These are really popular with thieves because apparently it's quite easy to do what's called a relay attack, where you just amplify the key's signal so you can get into it and start it and take off with it. If you do have one or you're buying one, make sure the key isn't stored anywhere near the car or is in a secure, tight position. Now, a few owners have complained about the wear and tear of some of the buttons, and this car is a little bit guilty of it. As they wear, they get oddly sticky, and it happens on the center console as well. That's just a bit gross. Just back to the infotainment systems for a moment, many owners have complained that they're just slow to operate. This can affect newer models as well. Now, look, please don't think that these issues impact every single Range Rover out there. Through our research, the vast majority of owners we spoke to adore their vehicles and have only had a couple of problems here and there. Even this car, it's got over 200,000 Ks on it. It has very few issues at all. Actually, just on this example, Peter, mate, thank you so much for lending us your car. You're a legend. Actually, if you have a cool car that you'd like to see us feature on ReDriven, let us know in the comments down there or hit us up on the socials. Okay, now, mechanically, what goes wrong with these? I can't tell you. I'm not a qualified mechanic, but Jim certainly is.
We've all heard the horror stories about how unreliable these things are. Well, I was just going to have a very short section here and just say they're all shit, don't go anywhere near them, but I have to explain. The 2 litre and 3 litre Ingenium petrol engines, They actually have a fairly complicated timing chain and valve train setup. Now, coincidentally, that's also the weak point of these engines. They suffer from stretch chains and broken tensioners and guides, and just occasionally catastrophic failures. And just for shits and giggles, like a lot of modern day modular engine designs, the chains are actually at the back of the engine, which means when they fail, or even before they fail and they're just making a noise and you have to repair them, either the engine has to come out or the transmission has to come out just for access. Now that just makes a few hour timing chain job into a day and a half nightmare. Now the V6 and the V8 petrol engines, I'm going to group those together because they actually share a lot of components, and they also, surprise, surprise, share a lot of problems too. A fun fact with these engines, the V6 engine is the same block as the V8 engine, just with the back two cylinders literally blanked off. Some say engineering genius, some say weird and cheap. And no surprises here, the most common problem with these are timing chain complications. Thankfully that chain is actually at the front of the engine on these, so it's not too bad when it fails. These suffer from all the same problems of all the other timing chains in just about everything these days. When they fail, it doesn't always cause a catastrophic engine failure. If the chain should break or slip, it usually just destroys everything inside the head, so quite often the heads can just come off and they can be repaired, which is probably better, but still really expensive. The oil pump drive, it has its own separate chain down the bottom. It has problems too. The tensioner there just fails. If you're going to do the chains, you're going to do all of them at the same time, regardless of which one has failed. But the key is here, if you hear it rattling, cold start especially, you just need to get it repaired as soon as possible. The supercharger drive coupling, that's not going to cause a huge engine failure, but the coupling itself does fail occasionally. Relatively cheap and easy to fix actually. The cooling system on these is fairly fragile too, a lot of plastic components, especially the thermostat housing. It is very much prone to leaking and splitting, so that's probably going to be the first thing you're going to need to change. The V6 diesel now, look, it is a Ford engine with plenty of well-documented and very serious engine problems. Plenty of turbo issues, plenty of EGR valve and EGR cooler complications, plenty of high pressure fuel pump complications, and oil coolers too. They often split and just piss out coolant everywhere. And speaking of pissing out coolant, yes, the thermostat and the water pumps are prone to failure too. The biggest problem with these V6 diesels is bottom end failure. Big end bearings and main bearings, and occasionally the crankshaft just breaks in half. Like, that is a problem that does not happen in very many other cars. Like, seriously, how does that happen? And when it does happen, needless to say, it's a complete engine replacement. There's nothing repairable in there, it's just rooted. Now, thankfully, these have a timing belt, not a timing chain. And that absolutely has to be changed on time at 165,000 Ks. They also have a secondary belt at the back of the engine just for the high pressure fuel pump. They absolutely must be changed on time. We've seen the belts break and the tensioners fail, and it's not pretty and it's certainly not cheap. The 4.4 V8 diesel now, one of the big problems with these is oil dilution. That comes with a whole list of ongoing secondary problems after that. Firstly, diluted oil is terrible for the longevity of the engine. And if it gets too bad and the oil rises too much, you can have a runaway diesel scenario. That is just also game over, engine failure. Now that isn't every single one of them, and that's only worst case scenario, but definitely something to keep in mind. They also have plenty of turbo issues and all the usual problems with DPF and EGR complications too. They do have slightly less issues with timing chains and just spontaneous bottom end failures, but they do still have plenty of issues. A lot of those issues are less common on well-serviced examples, but the problem here is people think they're doing the right thing and getting it serviced on time, but this is one of those cars with a ridiculous service schedule, 26,000 Ks. If you only service it every 26,000 Ks, it will not last. The best chance you've got if you want it to last, service it every 10,000 Ks. It won't completely avoid all of the problems, but it will most certainly help. As for all of the hybrids in these, they are the least popular and most complicated versions of a vehicle that's widely considered to be very unreliable, which is exactly why you should avoid it. Typically, these hybrids and cars like that, they are very poorly supported long-term by dealerships. That's in terms of spare parts and knowledge base. Your independent mechanic is going to hate them and they're going to have terrible resale. Now the transmissions in these, thankfully they're not made by Land Rover or Ford. They are the ZF unit, the ZF 8-speed, which is in just about everything that's rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive these days. Typically a pretty good gearbox. Just get it serviced every 40,000 Ks. Regardless of what the interval says, just do it every 40,000 Ks. Models of these that have air suspension, they are just known for problems from front to rear. The compressors play out, the airbags leak, the ride height sensors fail. They're just terrible. Highly recommend you avoid that. which is going to be hard because the vast majority of them have air suspension. Some owners are going to hear this and think it's just Land Rover bashing and scaremongering because they've never had these problems with airs. And to be fair, not all of these problems happen to all of these Range Rovers. But Land Rover's average ranking in mainstream dependability reports from 2015 to 21 is third last. Just saying.
Before we tell you if you should buy one of these or not, it's really important to recognise that this generation of Range Rover, it populates the most extreme ends of the used car market. At one end, it is utterly brilliant, but at the other end, my God, it can be terrible. So even if we were to recommend buying one of these, we're talking to a very specific person. If you are extremely wealthy and identify as a hardcore Range Rover fan, and you found a perfect example owned by someone exactly like you, yeah, sure, buy one. I mean, it's only money, right? But if you don't fit into that criteria, my God, no, do not buy one. As brilliant as these can be, my God, they can be terrible. But if you weren't to buy this, but you still want the ultimate luxury, incredible build quality, and a totally unique driving experience, we've got a wild card suggestion for you. It's this. But if you weren't to buy that or this, what would you buy instead? Let us know in the comments. See you next time.
High pressure fuel pump.
Power window and mirrors. Me.
Typically hybrids